Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going straight down the rabbit hole. You know those wild, absolutely paranoid theories you hear about? The ones everyone laughs off as complete nonsense? Well, we're looking at the times those theories actually turned out to be verified, documented facts. I'm talking about the moments where the receipts were finally, indisputably shown.
So what if the craziest rumors out there turned out to be completely true? Well, let's just dive right into it. We're going to explore 7 distinct stories today, and they escalate from, kind of absurd, isolated government experiments all the way up to massive, system-wide global cover-ups. If you love structure and you love facts, you are definitely in the right place. We're about to see definitive proof that reality is often way stranger, and honestly sometimes way darker, than fiction.
Okay, kicking things off with Level 1, Bizarre Government Science.
We're starting with operations that sound so ridiculous they literally feel like a joke. Like, did the CIA really try to use animals as spies? I mean, come on. But actually, yes. Declassified documents from the early 2000s completely confirm that the CIA poured massive resources into animal espionage during the Cold War. Look, at the time, sending a human agent into the Soviet Union was practically a death sentence. If you got caught, that was it, execution. So the CIA desperately needed a way to listen in on conversations without drawing any suspicion whatsoever.
To pull this off, they developed 2 completely unbelievable programs. First up was the Insectothopter. By the 1970s, CIA engineers actually built a tiny drone designed to look exactly like a dragonfly, complete with a tiny engine and a hidden microphone right in its head. Wild, right? But even before that, they launched something called Project Acoustic Kitty. The premise here was to turn a living cat into a walking listening device. Because, honestly, who suspects a stray cat?
The utter absurdity of this plan is just hard to overstate. Surgeons literally implanted a microphone, a radio transmitter, and an antenna directly into a living cat. And after spending roughly $170 million in today's money, $170 million, they took their multi-million-dollar spy cat out for its first real mission in Washington, D.C. back in 1967. They released it near 2 men sitting on a park bench. So how did this grand espionage mission end? Well, the cat wandered right into the street and was instantly hit by a taxi. Boom. Mission over before it even began.
Moving from animal spies to elemental control. For decades, you've probably heard people suspecting the military of secretly manipulating the weather. It's like one of the most classic conspiracy tropes out there. But here's the thing. During the Vietnam War, this wasn't just a myth. It was an actual deployed military strategy.
Back in 1966, the U.S. military launched Operation Popeye to wash out enemy supply routes that were hidden deep in the Vietnamese jungle. The U.S. secretly flew over 2,600 missions, basically dumping canisters of silver iodide into the clouds to trigger massive, heavy monsoons. And it worked. It turned dirt roads into absolute mud and successfully stalled supply chains. But then, in 1971, a Washington Post reporter blew the lid off the whole project. The revelation was so shocking to the public that by 1977, world leaders actually signed an international treaty officially banning the use of weather as a weapon of war.
Let's move on to Level 2, Corporate Greed and Deception.
So, leaving isolated government experiments behind, we enter this really chilling realm where massive companies sacrifice consumer safety and just basic transparency purely for profit. Back in the 1970s, there was this dark rumor going around that the Ford Pinto was a known death trap. People said that if it was hit from behind, the car would just burst into flames. The terrifying truth? Ford engineers only had 25 months to design the car instead of the standard 43. They totally rushed it. They put the gas tank right behind the rear bumper, and their own crash test proved it would rupture and ignite. But they went ahead and sold millions of them anyway.
The absolutely crucial point here is this brutal, cold-blooded calculus. Internal documents eventually obtained by a reporter showed that Ford executives quite literally did the math. They estimated it would cost about $137 million to recall and fix the vehicles. But on the flip side, they figured that just paying out lawsuit settlements to the victims' families would only cost around $50 million. So they decided it was $87 million cheaper to just let people burn. Seriously. Eventually, massive public outrage and lawsuits forced a recall, but by then the damage was already done. Okay, let's jump to a much more recent corporate conspiracy. For years, paranoid consumers, maybe even you, swore their old iPhones suddenly got super sluggish right around the exact time new models were released. It really felt like pure tech paranoia, right? Just a classic case of confirmation bias. Well, that is, until 2017, when those paranoid users were proven to be 100% right.
A software developer named John Poole decided to actually run the performance tests, and he proved that the iOS 10.2.1 update was deliberately throttling performance on older phones. Faced with this hard data, Apple finally had to admit that, yeah, they were secretly doing it. Now, their defense was that they slowed down the processors to prevent older, degraded batteries from suddenly crashing the phones.
But look, the real issue wasn't the battery physics, it was the total lack of transparency. They completely hid it from their customers. And this sparked global fury. We saw massive lawsuits pop up across multiple countries, accusing Apple of deceptive practices. Finally, in 2020, Apple agreed to settle, paying out a staggering $500 million settlement. $500 million.
Stepping it up now to level 3, rewriting public health.
This is where the deception isn't just about a single faulty car or a slowed-down smartphone. We're talking about manipulating the fundamental health guidelines of an entire society. In the late 1950s and 60s, Americans were suffering from this huge, terrifying spike in heart attacks. Doctors were scrambling for answers, and pretty much everyone started pointing the finger at fatty foods. But behind closed doors, a massive conspiracy was quietly orchestrating the dietary downfall of the public, specifically to make sure that sugar entirely avoided the blame.
In 1965, a group called the Sugar Research Foundation secretly paid Harvard scientists tens of thousands of dollars to write a study that downplayed the dangers of sugar. Fast forward to 1967, and that corrupted Harvard paper is published, boldly telling the world that cutting fat was the absolute best way to avoid heart disease. And because it had that prestigious Harvard name attached to it, the world listened. We literally spent 50 years eating low-fat foods that were packed with extra sugar simply because the truth was buried. It wasn't until researcher Kristen Carnes finally uncovered the confidential documents in 2016 that the whole thing blew open.
And what makes this truly, deeply terrifying is the actual internal communication. This quote right here, this is what a sugar executive wrote back to those corrupted scientists celebrating the 1967 study. Let me assure you, this is quite what we had in mind. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were protecting their billions in profit, while millions of everyday people paid the price with their health, consuming high-sugar diets under the complete illusion that it was the healthy choice.
All right, which brings us to level 4, cults and secret societies.
We've looked at corporate deception, but now we are entering the darkest, most complex tier of all. This is where shadow systems successfully infiltrate the government itself and powerful elites gather to wield immense secret power. Now, the Church of Scientology, founded by sci-fi writer L. Ron Hubbard back in 1953, has always been surrounded by controversy. Former members had long accused the church of extortion and harassment. But when the U.S. government actually revoked Scientology's tax-exempt status, Hubbard didn't just write a complaint letter. No, he launched a full-blown espionage assault on the United States government. In 1973, Hubbard launched what he called Operation Snow White. He literally trained his followers as spies. He taught them to forge IDs and sent them to get hired inside major government agencies, like the IRS and the Department of Justice, specifically to steal and destroy critical records. And they didn't stop at agencies. They targeted individuals, too. When author Paulette Cooper wrote a book criticizing them, Scientology spies stole her personal stationery, acquired her fingerprints, and sent fake bomb threats to their own church just to frame her. She was nearly sent to federal prison for it.
The sheer scale of this operation is almost impossible to comprehend. Before a massive FBI raid in 1977 finally uncovered the forged IDs and the stolen documents, putting a stop to the plot, Scientology spies had successfully infiltrated an astounding 136 different government agencies across 30 different countries. Think about that. It remains one of the largest infiltrations of the U.S. government in history.
Finally, we arrive at the ultimate conspiracy trope. Look, we've all heard the rumors, right? Elite men, presidents, CEOs, titans of industry, secretly meeting out in the woods to decide the fate of the world while performing these dark, occult-like rituals. It sounds like pure, unadulterated paranoid delusion. But Bohemian Grove is a real place in the California redwoods, and it's been operating since the late 1800s. In 1989, a journalist named Philip Weiss actually managed to sneak past their intense security and stay on the grounds for 7 days. He completely confirmed that, yes, the world's most powerful men do indeed gather there in secret. And believe it or not, after dark, they actually dress in robes and perform a ritual called the cremation of care. They burn a coffin effigy, which is supposed to represent everyday worries, right in front of a giant 40-foot stone owl statue. You literally cannot make this stuff up.
So from multi-million-dollar spy cats getting hit by taxis, to corrupted food science, to elite forest rituals with giant owls, this explainer proves one really vital point. The line between a crazy conspiracy theory and verified historical fact is sometimes just a matter of time and a few declassified documents. While the truth might be hidden for a while to protect profits or power, it does eventually come to light. So I'll leave you with this final thought. When governments, corporations, and powerful organizations all desperately want you to hear one specific narrative, what else are we trusting without question today? Stay curious and keep questioning.